All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Fraud and Risk Analytics on a Sunday morning. And hopefully, you would have done your required things. And this morning is going to be a good one because the topic itself is so interesting, which is on fraud and risk analytics. Happens quite a lot more around us and happens quite a lot probably with us also. And we need to be a lot more vigilant about it as a user. Plus, we need to be extra vigilant as a organization to prevent this happening because it can really erode the bottom line or the profits of the organization. And this becomes a challenge for companies to survive it. So this four-part series of fraud and risk analytics is going to be covering fraud, different types of fraud in session 1 and 2. Session 3 and 4 is going to be dedicated to risk and the types of risk and what needs to be done to prevent or avoid these kinds of risks as well. So very, very quickly, guys, what are the objectives? These are as per the course outline shared, as well as what you would have gone through in your learning modules. But this is just to summarize what are we going to be covering here as far as the learning objectives are concerned. First of all, as I said, we want to understand this beast called as fraud. And we want to understand what does it take to obviously prevent it, but before we prevent it, we want to understand it, and therefore the risk that it takes to detect fraud and therefore to prevent it. Fraud can occur across different stages. Most importantly, the credit card cycle and associated risks with credit card and credit risk, and that's what we're going to be talking about as an objective. And lastly, as I had said, session 3 and session 4 dedicated to types of risks and why should you identify these risks and why do you want to obviously overcome them. We will also be discussing that. So before we get started, people, these are the 4 sessions and how these 4 sessions are planned. Session 1 today, an overview where we talk about fraud, introduce the topic, tell you about different types of fraud industries. What are the different modules or rather models that are available that one can deploy to prevent and detect fraud. Session 2 dedicated entirely to credit card because that's an important piece of fraud and risk analytics, and we'll see that in session 2. Session 3, we talk about types of risks, namely market, credit, and regulatory. And session 4, we're going to be talking about operational risk analysis as it would be. And of course, in the last session, we will be discussing any queries, clarifications that you may want to have on the project. And that is what I plan to do in session number 4. This is a webinar-based system today, so highly encourage you to talk, discuss, contribute, participate to just enhance learnings of the class to significantly as would have been otherwise. So strongly encourage you not to just keep your cameras on and do something else. Kindly don't do that. Since you're here, let's give it our 500% and let's be here for the next 2.5 hours together. So do contribute generously and to significantly increase the learnings of the class on fraud and risk analytics. While I'm talking, if you want to say so, please raise your hand. I will give you the opportunity to talk. Otherwise, with the people around you, let's make it very, very robust with the discussions that we want to bring on board. So guys, we know about fraud probably, but we've talked about it in various forums, in various manners. Probably we've experienced it also, but let's try and understand these activities. Obviously you are booking a cab and now you have the Olas and the Ubers, and therefore you are wanting to go from place 1 to place 2, and you register yourself giving your credit card. You checking your emails as part of your work every day, and we know what our IT group tells us every day is to take care of the spam emails. Is it from a genuine source? And all those things keep coming to us. E-commerce on the rise. So you buy goods and services through an e-commerce portal, and you want to obviously receive these goods and services as per your desire on a stipulated date. And for all of these, with going cashless, thanks to the pandemic, the cashless has only increased as otherwise. And people are now even talking about, let's not write a check, let's do a direct debit transfer. And with all these, happening around us very commonly, either we are a part of it or we are not. So, guys, in all these areas or activities, do you believe that there is an element of fraud, or is this susceptible to fraud? Okay, yes. And good, but why yes, Kunal or Bharani? Okay. In all of them, chances of data leak, and all of them spam phishing mails, Bharani. And I think instead of saying that, for which one are these applicable that you guys have mentioned, rightly mentioned, but for which one? Number one, number two, number three, or number four, or all of them? Mm-hmm. Data leakage and therefore credit card compromise for the fourth one. That is correct. And that would be applicable for the first one as well. And the phishing spam would be for the second one, as somebody had mentioned. And yes, so therefore, all of these are fraudulent activities that happen around you, which we need to be very, very, identity leak and locations also, absolutely, Kishore. And so therefore, with all of these, what happens is they are all activities which are susceptible to fraud, and we need to be mindful about it. Sometimes, even though it is the slip of the moment, and in that delicate moment we have a problem which we want to arrest, but we are not able to, because it's kind of slipped somewhere down the radar, and we need to bring back our force onto it. So yes, they're all activities that are susceptible to fraud because they involve a payment or they involve an exchange of communication. And this could therefore lead to a problem which we would like to avoid. So what do you think is the definition of fraud? Anyone? What is that, or how would you define fraud? What is fraud? Anybody, guys? What is fraud? Anything that's not ethical, okay, or okay, so good one. You're saying anything that's illegal, any scrupulous activity, unethical activity. So the things that are coming out is something which is not acceptable ethically is the reason, or can be considered as a fraud. Okay. Anybody experienced it, or do you know somebody who's got it? Got it as in uh, who's been a victim? Okay, good. Anybody wants to tell us about that? Anybody? Nobody? Yes, it is very, very common when you're taking money out of the ATM. People are watching behind you, and they're watching the code that you're entering, and that gets compromised, and your ATM account gets hacked, and people are, very, very skeptical and taking these details off, and then obviously they're withdrawing money on your behalf. So a friend of mine was expecting something from overseas, and it was through the post office that things were going to come through. And he in a spur of a moment, he got an SMS saying, please click onto this post office link for your customs parcel to get through. And he opened it and it said you got to pay some $21 something as a customs fee. Knowing that it was a international package, he kind of slipped it, and he made the payment. While he was making the payment for $21, it said, are you willing to pay? You need to pay $21. While he paid that, he was asked for an OTP. And when he filled in his OTP, it said, did not go through, put your OTP again. And he put in the second time and he put in the third time. Interestingly, for this till the third time, he did not get an intimation from his bank. And only after the third time did he get it that there were 3 transactions that happened through the OTP. And it was not for 21, it was for $2,100. So $2,100. And he lost about 6,000. A complaint, got half the money back, but he lost half of that after about a 40-day or a 60-day period, that had this problem. And obviously it was an issue. Yeah. Okay, he signed a check for some amount and he was given a magic pen by the person, which later on became a blank check. Oh, wow. Okay. From his account, Priyansh? That is, yeah. Wow, that's yeah. These things are also happen. The buyer of Olex asks for request QR code. As soon as you give them the QR code, they take out money from our account. Yes, and therefore we need to be, extremely vigilant about what we do, how we do. The awareness itself is amazingly gone up in the last 10 years compared to what it was 10 years ago. But today, for every transactions as a user, we are having our audit functions. We look at it in a much more skeptical manner than it would have been otherwise. Yeah. So yes, it is common. It happens with the slip of a moment. It could happen. It occur. It is all possibilities. And as users, the amount of losses that you go through is more of at a micro perspective. But at the macro perspective, it is a disaster, because just imagine your HR or your manager or your HR or your CEO comes and tells you, sorry guys, can't give you bonus this year because we had to lose about X amount of money as far as losses are concerned and due to fraudulent activities. And as a result of which we can't give you bonuses. Now that is such a shameful statement, but it happens. And because of somebody's problems, we have to go through that risk and problem, and nobody wants that. As employees, stakeholders, we don't want it. As external stakeholders, the shareholders don't want it. Customers want to invest in us and they don't want to lose out on these privileges. And therefore, fraud and risk becomes an important element for organizations to look into. Oh, very good, Kunal. That's being very smart and vigilant about it. Of quick response. That's very good. So people, therefore, what is fraud actually? We've talked about it. Fraud is, something which is illegal. People have said it, and therefore it is a big no to begin with. The FBI definition says it is obviously illegal activity, but it is something which is not done with honesty, integrity. It is a dishonest activity also. It could be carried out by institutions or it could be carried out by individuals. And why would they do that? Because they want to provide for whatever personal reasons, but largely there's a study there also. And the most important reason is to make quick money, easy money, fast money. And people get kick out of doing these things at a personal level, which is ridiculous, but they do. And as a result of which the society or the person, a lot of people have got to suffer as a result of these kinds of hidden motives that fraudsters have. So yes, it is dishonest and illegal. Also, the definition from the Oxford says it's wrongful, which means it's not acceptable. And obviously, it's criminal deception. Why is it done? It is intended to result in a financial gain or a personal gain. Yes, Kunal, I heard about it. There is a couple of series on the OTT platform on this, and people have watched it. I have not watched the full one, but I have heard about it and definitely seen the previews of it. Good. Yeah, there are. So also by all the definitions, what it's telling us is fraud is a no. It's law. It's wrong. It's not right. It's dishonest. It's illegal. Yeah, and therefore that needs to be averted. That needs to be stopped. Can we get 100%, fraud-free organization or a risk-free organization, 100%, or can we, aspire or aim to do that? What would you advise there as a consultant? Should you or should you not? Bharani, your sounds very much like senior management. We can aim, but practically difficult. Then why should we aim if it's practically difficult? Correct. So then if it's practically difficult, then do you believe we should aim? If you're a fraud and risk consultant and somebody says, I want to keep an objective of 100% fraud-free transactions, your advice to these people would be? Yes, or you can, but you can't. How are we going to say this? Yes, because if we aim to do so, then only we'll be able to reduce. No, but my target is Ayush 100%. So are you going to give a green go for it? You can raise your hand or you can talk about it, class. How many of you believe that it is 100% risk and fraud free organization and that is an achievable target? If it is an achievable target, we give it. If it's not achievable a target, then what do we do about it? Anyone? It is not a realistic target for sure. Yes, correct, it's not a realistic target. And if you aim for it, you will never achieve it. If you never achieve it, you will never have performed in your organizations. You would always be told you have not achieved your objective, and there is more frustration than there is more accomplishment in such organizations. And hence what we need to do is, we all know that as an organization we cannot be 100% fraud or risk-free organization, and hence we need to prioritize the areas which are more susceptible to fraud and reduce those in terms of your priority. And that's what becomes important when you study fraud and risk, because what you do, you are able to allocate resources better. You're able to better focus on what you want to improve, how you want to improve, and more importantly, why are you working on this and not something else? So, everybody, all organizations have appetite to increase market share, increase the profits, increase customer base, whatever that objective is of financial growth. If we want to increase our financial growth, the best way to increase our financial growth is through income that we are generating, and we want to get an income that we are generating in the best possible manner, prioritized to the extent that the top most important risks is something that we have worked upon. Yeah. So that is what becomes important in fraud and risk. So never 100%, as close to as possible. But what we use the term is we prioritize our risks and frauds, and that is what we would like to work upon first. Because in that definition, we are not going to go back to business and say, hey, stop going into these segments or those areas or those geographies because they are risk. Because there is risk. If there is risk, how do we mitigate those in terms of priorities? What we need to tell them. Yeah. Good. Some interesting facts and figures that we want to talk about. Yes, and keep your employees more trained about it. And therefore, a lot of the training that happens now to staff, continuous basis, not one-time basis, especially to new joiners as well, is on fraud, is on how to handle fraud and risk. So fraud is big business affecting every industry in the country, and obviously it does not leave one or it does not leave a few. It is every industry is susceptible to fraud. It's said that about 5% of the revenues are lost each year. And this creates a big impact, not only on the liquidity, but it also creates an impact on the company or the brand's reputation, which you don't want to let go of. In the United States itself, it is the number one country which is on the list of fraud and risk, and there's an estimated 600 billion US, which is what it costs the economy, because fraud inherently involves efforts. Many go undetected because the fraudsters, like how we are more vigilant, the fraudsters have also become much more sophisticated, and they have come up with new ways and means of getting into the accounts that you have, or hacking, or whatever other activities that they do to be able to create um, um, that aura around them that they cannot be touched or they cannot be detected. Yes, it's getting more and more sophisticated, more and more difficult. But yes, there are tools and techniques, and technology has come a long way to help to aid in this fight of the organization to detect and therefore to prevent frauds. And why is all of this happening? And this is something interesting that we need to be aware of. And this is the amount of data that's around us is huge. We've heard this term saying data is the new oil, and analysis is therefore the new soil. Now, when you analyze the data, you are analyzing the data, what you want to do is you want to make sure that the data that you're using is not compromised, and the data that you're using is much more relevant today. So just look at this one here. It says nearly 40% of big organizations have mentioned that analyzing data is the biggest challenge. So which means they have it, but they don't know what to do about it, which is okay. But look at this. Over 600 billion is wasted in terms of poor quality of data. 247 billion emails sent every day, 80% are spam. That's a huge number there. So very, very susceptible to phishing or spam emails that are coming into the organization. 70% of data created by consumers, transaction, exchange, but organizations are responsible for managing only 80% of it. So a lot is going wasted, a lot is not reliable, but it is available, as a result of which organizations and management want us to carry out real-time analytics, want to give us real-time answers, want to make sure how a brand is performing in the social sphere, to be able to give them the power, as we say, to take and make the right decisions at the right time. Yeah. So because there is an information overload, we need to be very, very extra careful of ensuring that we are using the right data firstly, and we are also making sure that this data is going to help us detect and prevent fraud as well. Now, there is these two terms that are widely used in the field of fraud and risk analytics, or in any field for analytics for that matter. And they use the term saying data has got to be reliable and data has got to be valid. What do we mean by reliability, data reliability, or reliable data? What is your understanding of data reliable? Yeah. Correct. So Jayesh says it's from the correct source. Any other word, when data is reliable, it is correct. Any other word, true, verified, any other word, simpler word, all of these are correct. Okay. Trustworthy, and also, yeah, all these are correct. Safe, any other? authentic source, also called as error-free. Yeah, so all that you've said is right. It's trustworthy, it's authentic, it's correct, it's reliable, it's dependable, it's safe and secure, and therefore it is error-free. So data source has got to be reliable when you want to do any kind of analysis. One of the biggest challenges that organizations face is the data itself is not reliable, and that becomes a problem because you got to spend a lot of time processing the data to make it reliable. Okay. The second part of data is the data source is reliable and the data source is valid. What do we mean by valid? Data source is reliable and data source is valid. So what do we mean by valid? It's not from someone random, okay? Not outdated. So Ayush, what did you have for breakfast this morning? And Priyansh, what do you plan to do after class today? Okay. Is Ayush's answer a valid answer? And what about it? What does Priyansh want to do after class today? Priyansh is not answering. He has probably no plans. So, but okay. Okay. Now, are both these answers valid answers, guys? Ayush question, what breakfast do you have? And he's mentioned something there that he's had something. And Priyansh has also mentioned that he probably wants to go and have coffee in the evening. Are they valid answers? Why are they valid answers, Bharani? Because you said it. It's from the source, okay, which is error free, which is okay. So therefore it's reliable. But then why is it valid? Suppose I ask, one of the questions is, what did you have for breakfast? And the answer would have been, I plan to go out for coffee after class. Is that a valid answer? Okay, so is that a valid answer? What do you plan to do after class today? And somebody says, I had toast for breakfast. Why not? Because yes, good. Why not? Because Uh, we cannot verify that. All right. Yeah. So that way, everything that's happened historically cannot be verified. And in the future, we don't know where it is. So, no. So, therefore, all answers are invalid. Thank you, Jaya. The answer is not for the question asked. Very true. And that is the reason why they are invalid or valid questions or answers. If the data that you're looking at is reliable, but it is not going to answer your objective, then that data does not need to be going into the fraud and risk analytics framework. So, but if it is going to answer your objective in whatever ways and means and forms, then yes, it needs to be there in your data analysis because it answers the objective that you're looking for. Yeah. Now, in our case, our objective is pretty standard or laid, cast in stone, which is that we want to detect and prevent fraud. So anything outside this arena is not our objective. So whatever data that we're looking at must fulfill the objectivity of it being reliable, which is error-free, and it being valid, which means it is answering the objective. Yeah. And if these two conditions are met, then yes, that data is valid, that data is reliable, and you can therefore work with that data to be able to, achieve your objective. In our case, the objective being either I'm detecting fraud or I am preventing fraud. Yeah. Okay. Important question. Who is the custodian of data in the organization? So it is typically the analyst, the person who's doing the analysis. So in the case of fraud and risk, it is the fraud and risk analytic analysis person who's in charge of doing this analysis. And while the time before they're doing it, they have to ensure that the data is not only reliable, error-free, but also valid. And only then should you go ahead with the analysis. Interestingly, two-thirds of your time is spent in data reliability and making sure that the data is not only reliable, but it is available in a manner that you can do whatever analysis that you wish to do. Because a lot of this data that one looks at, an insurance company, for example, will look at your application, supporting documents. It will look at unstructured data also, including your social media accounts and the pictures that you have posted or provided, to be able to detect whether the insurance claim that you're making is a genuine one or not. Okay, and that is important. Process owners, yes, Bharani, that is the process owner. The analyst does not only analyze the data and say, my job is done. The analyst's job is to make sure that you get the data from the right source. Yeah. And if you've spotted it, if suppose I want to get data, I'm the fraud and risk analytics person, and I want to get some data from the finance department. And I have noticed that the finance department data is not reliable. Now I have to highlight this because the finance guy is not doing it. I have to highlight this, bring it on board, and make sure that the finance guy is working and providing me with reliable data. Okay. So therefore, yes, the process owner has to do it, but if the process owner is slipping, not doing it, not taking ownership or charge, then the fraud and risk analysis person has to drive this, because ultimately he or she needs this data for their analysis. And of course, you can't do this at a micro or at an individual level. It is at the organization level, and it becomes a law when your CEO or the highest authority in the organization signs off and says, henceforth, we're going to use this data only for this purpose, and this data is going to be reliable for this. We have to make sure that the finance department does 1, 2, 3 activities. Yeah. So that kind of facilitation happens, and this is therefore going to be driven by the analyst himself or herself, because they are the ultimate recipients of this data. Yeah, otherwise, what happens, guys, is for example, there are multiple sources of data, and with multiple sources of data, who should you get this data from? For instance, new customers onboarded. Now, new customers onboarded, who should you be getting this data from in the organizations? Operations, IT, or business, or finance? Four sources. Which are the 4 sources that you want to get it from? IT. Why IT, Ayush? Finance, and therefore why finance also, Kunal? Who would you get this data from that you want to work with? The data being the data on number of new customers onboarded. Okay, now we have 3 people in our class. So who Kunal says finance, Ayush says IT, and Jayesh says business or marketing specifically. So 3 different sources for the same data. Which source should I be using? Sales. Okay. Another 4th source come through within business only. Marketing and sales, different sources, and therefore I will choose sales. Any other? Now, what are the chances that if I use any of these sources and I present it into the meeting room, somebody in the room says your data is not reliable, this is not how it is, the real number is this, the silo effect. We see lots of such jokers in the meeting room, don't we? So which data source should we be using and why? You can use any data source largely, but it has to be approved by the CEO saying we will only be using ITs or marketings or sales or finances. Typically in the organization, it is the finance department that provides this number, because this is the final number after the customer has been onboarded and the customer's accounts have been created into the financial system to determine the profitability of that customer. So usually IT, the lists are usually not up to speed or mark. Marketing can camouflage the results and therefore not relied upon. And typically, organizations have it either from IT or from finance. The finance guy can get it from IT and then make sure that it is reliable, do the test, due diligence, and then pass it forward. So every and all sources of data that you're going to look at in the field of data fraud and risk analytics needs to be reliable and valid. Okay, because if it is not neither of them, it is a problem. Yeah. If you have a maker checker system in most organizations, Bharani. So if this guy in finance is manipulating the data that is extracted from the system, then there has to be a maker and a checker, somebody who extracts, somebody else who verifies that this is the right data that we're using or we are looking at. And if it is a fraudulent piece of data that you're using, then you have somebody called as the audit functions who audit your department's doings, and after they audit your department's doings, they will spot it. Can't be verifying. No, you can't be verifying because sales will do at the time of the customer saying yes. Once the documentation comes through, then it gets recorded by finance, and therefore the data from finance is found to be usually more accurate than from sales. But again, depends on the organization. The ultimate rule of thumb is please get it validated, vetted before you do anything with that piece of data. Yeah. And everybody, therefore, across the organization should only be looking at that data source and not multiple data sources, because whatever you do from multiple data sources is going to lead to multiple conclusions and not to a unified strategy of how you're going to detect and prevent frauds. Very good. Now, if that data is reliable, that's fantastic. So anybody can log over to that central server and then extract the data that is required. And that is fantastic. Organizations are investing thanks to cloud. Data storage becomes easy, retrieval becomes quite quick and fast, and analysis therefore becomes quite interesting to be done at whatever levels, at whatever points of times of interactions that are there with the customer. Good. So, that is the data and that is what has happened. So, who is susceptible to fraud? Everybody. Which industry is susceptible to fraud? Practically all. But the most susceptible, because they deal with cash on a day in and day out basis, your cab aggregators, your Ubers of the world, because they have the credit card details given there and they can be compromised faster than you think. Internet firms, Google's a lot of spam emails, and they put it into the spam folder as well. Google, Yahoo, Hotmail, and it is quite irritating when you get these spam emails, because they they work with that to make sure that it goes to a spam folder. And in order to get the best customer experience, but it could be quite irritating as well when you keep getting these into the main folder. Retail with e-commerce on the rise, the Amazons and the and the Reliances of the world are now therefore wanting you to transact for what you want to buy on the e-commerce portal. Bank operations, credit cards, lastly, where you are either giving a loan or giving a credit card, either a MasterCard or a Visa, and those are susceptible to fraud as well. So for industries largely. Now, here's an interesting one. If you are really, guys, interested in risk and fraud analytics as a career in the future, of course, this course is useful and important, but there is an association of certified fraud examiners. Kindly enroll yourself for their white papers that you will get from there. And they have a certified fraud examiner certificate, which is the most recognized in the field of risk and fraud analytics. So if you really want to do something in this area or in this field, highly advise that you get yourselves certified from this institute, which is the most recognized institute in the area of fraud and risk. So according to them, they published a report, and it's a 2020 report, but okay, again, the most recent one, I don't think things would have changed drastically now. If you see the top five industries in the case in terms of volumes of fraud, the banking is right on top, then government, manufacturing, healthcare, energy. And then in terms of value, you have mining, energy, etc., etc. So, there are different sets of industries that are getting impacted, both in terms of volume and in terms of value. Why do you think these companies differ, or these industries differ rather? Yeah, different domain. Any other reason why they differ? Yeah, because of obviously the amounts that you're dealing with in mining for a single transaction, the amount will be quite huge than a single transaction in the case of credit card or a loan fraud. And hence, in value terms, they are higher, but in volume terms, they are higher. And that's the reason for why they are different. Correct. Yes, different nature of business, nature of frauds in terms of the value and the volume game that is there in both these areas. Yeah. In the case of manufacturing, you have valuable assets like cash, inventory, and this can get stolen away because a lot of people in the manufacturing industry keep these amounts in liquid format and rather than in a safe and secure place, a locker, for instance, or into a bank account. There is stock also worth a lot of value, which is there in the warehouse and is stored there. Of course, it is insured, but yeah, when there is a fraud or a loss, then that hits or impacts the bottom line of the organization. Employees are in a unique position also. For example, in a construction company, there could be a manager who has an authorization limit and normally at a higher authorization limits than otherwise, and that can create a fraud. In most of the family run businesses, the trust of the employee is there, and with the trust of the employee, the person is given far more powers over the years based on trust. But when this trust can be misused is just a fraction of a second. So of course that fraud can happen. uh, Retail industry, where there is a lot of buy and sell happening on thanks to the e-commerce business, and this is on the rise. And if it is on the rise, it's going to be, and we need to make sure that we are not uh, contributing. We are being more aware, we are being more prudent about this fraud and taking necessary steps to begin with. uh, some industries have weak maker checker systems or weak internal controls to be able to detect and prevent frauds. Mining industry is one such example. Corruption is on the high in such an industry, and employees, cannot aren't allowed to enter the site. Uh, for food to be delivered, for supplies to be delivered, and that can result into a fraud. Many a times in the IT function also, when you have a third party consultant coming in and you have your server rooms or you have your data protected rooms, these people are not given access there. But just in case there is a slippage, then it can lead to big volumes of transaction losses leading to a fraud. Some examples of fraud that we probably know of that is, one is the Harshad Mehta case, which was quite popular, and yes, we are aware of it. Another one is the Belford case, and this is there was a film done on this also, which is The Wolf of the Wall Street in 2013. I'm going to share a video of Jordan Belfort, and then we can look at and we can then discuss it as well. Just a minute. Yeah, it's here. Okay, it's here.
Be made in this and money to be lost massively on both sides. You need to be really, really careful.
The real Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, is weighing in on the GameStop and AMC stock craze, warning that those jumping on board the handful of stocks that are going through the roof due to Reddit users are playing with fire. Belfort, who amassed a fortune in the 1990s as a stockbroker in New York City with his own firm before spending 22 months in prison for fraud and corruption, published his memoir, The Wolf of Wall Street, in 2007. That, of course, was adapted into a 2013 film of the same name starring Leonardo DiCaprio.
My name is Jordan Belfort. The year I turned 26, I made $49 million, which really pissed me off because it was $3 shy of $1 million a week.
In an interview with CNN Business, Belfort gave his take on the stocks that are skyrocketing via hype, mostly on Reddit.
If you could prove that they were actually colluding together, then it would be illegal.
The Wolf of Wall Street author and film subject went on to say this.
The problem is that, it's sort of this sort of weird, loose collusion where, one person says, let's stick together and stay strong. Theoretically, that's not legal, but I would doubt that the SEC would try to make a case out of something like that.
Belfort told CNN Business that the average person could actually make a lot of money through the hot stocks, but they could lose it all too.
It's like a modified pump and dump because at the end of the day, it will most certainly go back down because it's not trading based on any rational fundamental value.
Belfort cautioned this.
Just remember, every time the market goes up, like GameStop goes up, it's going to get harder and harder to make that next move up because the market cap eventually gets to a point it's just not sustainable.
Around 9 a.m. on Thursday, GameStop took a huge dive, down nearly 40%. Belfort said people are going to get hurt, and it will likely be the average lower-income individuals who attempt to catch the golden goose too late.
There are going to be some massive victims in this whole thing, and most certainly, and I think that, frankly, it's already starting. I think some of the brokerage firms like Ameritrade and others have suspended their own internal trading in some of these, ultra hot stocks.
For more on this story, go to thr.com. For the Hollywood Reporter News, I'm Tiffany Taylor.
There was another one also, guys. This is the lady in, she was running a company, I think Eleanor, or yeah, that's what the name was. And she was changing her voice to give commands to instructions to people to do things that were fraudulent, as a result of which there was a big problem or a scam of worth millions or billions of dollars. And this was a Silicon Valley firm, and obviously the firm went bankrupt and she was behind bars, but not immediately. She was probably doing this for a few years before it got spotted, it got detected, and she was taken on board. She was taken behind bars. Yeah. So yes, very, very common. We hear a lot of these cases right now whether we want to look at it in different parts of the world. So many scams going on, in India, that we hear about it on a daily basis, saying X, Y, Z, etc., etc. And these are obviously, areas that are not acceptable. It creates more problems than otherwise to the organizations and to the society as well. So different types of fraud. Data compromise is one of them. Phishing is another one. Insider threats is another one. And money laundering is another one. So let's talk about data compromise first. What is your understanding of data compromise? Yeah, we'll say, oh God, the data is compromised of this department or of this, etc., anything. Giving away confidential data like OTP, yeah. Customer information like card number, CVV of the back, data leakage, yeah. Institutions also, when you share data with the outside world or an external consultant. And yes, people and data have become strong assets of the organization nowadays than ever. Okay. Data is being released by someone who's not authorized to use it. So during the pandemic also, if certain people had to go to work because it is only that they could log in from the same IP address, the same monitor, and in the case of banking, it would be a central bank report and had to go in from the same person. Now, that same person was infected. That's a separate story. Another one had to be created, or somebody had to be authorized to do it. But otherwise, it was quite difficult because that same person had to go to the office, log into his PC or her PC, and send the report off to either the head office or to a regulator. Yeah. So data compromise, as rightly said, guys, it is obviously that your identity in terms of your name, your password, your bank accounts, and all these details are therefore stolen, are compromised, and they are used by your people, and that creates more of a problem than otherwise. Yeah. So there's an interesting video that I have on data compromise, and let's look at that as well. I think I had it here, 1 minute. Yep. Danger.
Your personal information is spread across many websites throughout the internet. From online banking, credit reports, e-commerce, tax returns, and healthcare accounts, your personal information may be at risk of loss or theft. Most businesses and organizations that you transact with have elaborate security programs to protect your personal information. But this doesn't stop cybercriminals from trying to steal your data. Due to vulnerabilities in software, these cybercriminals can infiltrate and steal not only your data, but potentially thousands of other people's information too. Data breaches and data theft affect millions of people around the world and is on the rise. Many companies have suffered a massive data breach, leading to layoffs, lawsuits, and fraud. Once these cybercriminals have your personal information, they can completely drain your bank account of its funds. A data breach can also result in identity theft, allowing someone else to use credit cards with your name, potentially damaging your credit history. In some cases, data breaches can result in blackmail if the victim was a member of a questionable site or has information they don't want made public. Individual users may be targeted with specifically designed malware that can delete or steal information off of a personal computer. While data breaches can severely impact individuals, businesses and government organizations are usually at a larger risk. Even employees can steal and sell personal information to third parties who use it for criminal purposes. Protect yourself against data breaches by changing your passwords often and using a password manager that generates secure passwords, such as Kaspersky Password Manager. Ensure that any sensitive information that is kept in cloud is well protected and encrypted with the latest security software. Finally, make regular backups of important data on a separate system, such as an external hard drive or cloud, to minimize the risk of losing vital information if a data breach does occur.
Yeah. So again, being more vigilant, being more aware, establishing a solid process of who can access the data, who can extract the data, who can use the data, and who can pass on that data wherever it needs to be within the organization. Not everybody should be given these rights and privileges. It should be reserved with a few of them only, just to make sure that you have the right robustness in the process to detect and prevent frauds from occurring later on. Yeah. We have another one. The other one is on phishing attacks, and this is also very, very common. So phishing, somebody had spoken about this earlier. It's obviously compromises that you get from your emails, and many a times you get some nice fancy little email and you open the website, and your personal details can be taken, or it can be your IP addresses get stolen, and then can result into lots of emails going in from your account, your social media. And many times it's happened on the social media platform that you had to write back to people saying, my Facebook account or my Insta account has been hacked and I want to do this and I'm changing that. So kindly do not believe in the messages that you're getting from imposters of mine. Yeah. An interesting video here also. Let's watch it. While they say this, guys, I'm not sure if you've done a check at yourself. Or did you spot most of them or some of them? And that would be interesting to see if there's anyone who did not spot anything, and that would be the most interesting one to talk about. Yeah. So I'll just finish. We'll finish this off, and then we can talk about it a bit more. Great. Any comments, anyone, on what we saw? So we saw two areas so far. One was data compromise, where data gets stolen and your identity gets hacked in a sense. Phishing is obviously your emails getting compromised and they are being used with your login details. Any comments so far, guys? Are we doing good in terms of the speed, the pace? It's been about an hour or so. So are we okay for how we have started this course? Okay. Great. So any comments on anything that we have discussed? Let's move on. So there are two more types of frauds. And the third one is insider threats. Now, insider threats, what is our understanding of insider threats? Yeah, insider threat. Any idea? Yeah, data leaked from the company itself. Okay. Unauthorized access by employees. So here the employees itself are the culprits and they are making sure that the data is passed on from one person to another person, and that is causing a compromise in the data. Okay, a small little example: in an organization, the HR person, or I think it was an HR assistant, it was noticed that this person was the moment a new joinee would open an account and would start the relationship with the company, the first salary that would go in, and a portion of that salary would get deposited into a different account, and it was well managed by the branch manager as well as the employee. It got spotted not month one, month two, but about 18 or 19 months after that. Of course, it was a problem, but it was a spontaneous audit that was happening, and that's when it got discovered. A lot of people do a lot of frauds by spending on petty cash, and therefore petty cash limits are also getting strained. The audits of petty cash expenses are also being done in a very, very judicious manner as opposed to how they were handled in the past. There was an employee who would put his petty cash money that he would get into the account, not in a separate account, but in the personal account. Now, when this got spotted, this itself, now, whatever intentions must be good, bad, or ugly, but the whole process to keep it into your personal account raises a lot of questions. And this was obviously seen as a no-no for the employee. So, sometimes you may have good intentions, we don't know, but the act is definitely not accepted, and it leads to more problems otherwise. Yeah. So insider threat.
One of the things that really struck me doing this project was the sheer scale of the red flags that organizations are able to ignore. My colleague Scott Sagan at Stanford University and I have put together a book on insider threats. Insiders pose devastating threats to high security organizations around the world. In 2001, right after the World Trade Center and Pentagon attacks, a series of letters containing anthrax arrived at locations at several places in the country, and it took the government years to figure out how this had happened. Bruce Ivins was a scientist at Fort Detrick, the Army's biological defense labs, and he was deeply troubled. While he had signed documents authorizing the organization to look at his medical records, no one ever bothered. The first psychiatrist he ever saw, long before the anthrax attacks, thought that he was the most dangerous patient she'd ever seen in her entire career. And when the anthrax attacks occurred, even though she didn't know he was working with biological agents, she immediately thought, I wonder if that's Bruce. He sent off so many red flags. He emailed his own staff complaining about his increasing paranoia and speculating about ending up in the newspaper with a headline, "Paranoid Man in Charge of Deadly Anthrax," and nobody reported that. Even when staff are complaining that they're afraid he's going to hurt them, no further action was taken. Organizations need to have processes in place where this kind of information can be reported easily, where there are incentives for reporting it, and where the investigation processes within the organization are seen by the staff as fair and reasonable. You can learn more about insider threats with detailed case studies, lessons learned, and new data on jihadist thinking and actions relating to insiders at nuclear facilities in a new book, Insider Threats, which
So guys, insider threats, another big one. And, a lot of, in banks especially, what happens is if there are, the half yearly closing or the annual closing, and 15 days before that, all staff are issued a letter or an email goes out saying these people, if you're trading on the stock exchange, any part of the world where the bank is listed, you are not expected to trade on the account or onto your account for the next X days until things get released, because you could know information, and as a result of which you could manipulate it to whatever extent that your contributions are. So these kinds of things are a very common thing that goes out as part of something that one has to be vigilant about, one has to be very, very careful about when you are dealing with the concept of insider threats. One of the, they're also called as whistleblowers. And when they're called as whistleblowers, it's important to know that these whistleblowers are taken care of. What is the biggest fear thing, guys, you believe is that of the whistleblower? The biggest fear. I mean, Facebook had a lot of that. They ignored that to change the brand after that, But what is the biggest fear of a whistleblower? Identity. Okay. Any other? Yeah. If the info is incorrect, what happens, Hemanti? If the info is correct, then or rather, if the info is incorrect, then what happens? Then the person is going to be under watch list or probably asked to leave also. Or if the information is correct, then to the same story. So as a result of which, job security and safety need to be guaranteed for the person before anything happens to the person, because it is something that you want to look into, look after your people, and don't penalize or punish them because the information is correct or incorrect. You must encourage them to do so. And there are laws passed by governments to make sure that staff are not going to be, if after the staff has raised a query or has rung the bell as a whistleblower, this staff, if your performance is bad, there has to be solid proofing about it. In some cases, the laws are such that they say you cannot let the person leave for X years because of this, and there is protection given by the external force, so that if it is being correct or incorrect, the staff does not get penalized. Yeah, good. So there are different types of insider threats. Now, whether it is a careless or a conscious insider threat, they still lead to a problem. The impact may be big or small, we don't know that, but it's still malicious is obviously, with intentions to provide more harm than otherwise. Then it is the negligent ones, which are the careless people. And this happens by chance, but it does have a problem. And then the last ones having some, it just happened to be, and, it is more accidental than intentional. You can let go of that person after a warning, but the ones that you really need to be vigilant about and watchful about are the malicious ones and the negligent ones, because today's negligent might hide under that belt and become malicious threat tomorrow. Yeah, that's not what you want to. So identify. Usually, the accidental ones will be very few in number. Malicious ones will be a lot more. But these are the imposters sitting in the organization, sharing information with competition or from the outside world that they shouldn't be. And the last kind of fraudulent activity, and this is called as money laundering. Okay, all of us heard this word before. This has been quite in the news. Politicians, famous personalities, a lot of money laundering cases being coming ahead of us. We've been hearing about them, and this is basically transporting money into the financial system to evade taxes, one biggest reasons, and to fund activities which are not of a genuine types. So it's basically those unaccounted for earnings that pass through from one person to another person, or from one identity to another person, and there is illegal trading of activity. That's how there's illegal business activity happening as a result of this kind of benefit that people take out, and that is money laundering. Okay, it's also called, used to be called as a hawala transaction. And a hawala transaction is there is no record, but it just money gets transported from one place to another, and it is obviously it gets laundered, and therefore an illegal act of that money, or the source of that money, becomes legal, and therefore it becomes we used to call it as black money converted into white. The central banks must play a very strong role in making sure that money laundering is working at its best, and the regulator has to have enough laws and robust systems to make sure that money laundering is not something that organizations or banks are suffering from. So three broad areas or sources of money laundering: placement, layering, and integration. So placement is things like when there is a change of currency, Indian rupee being moving out through the dollar or vice versa, or any other currency. There are huge amounts of cash deposits being made, of course, into your same bank, into your account, and there is a change of denominations that you've requested for. Layering, wire transfers happening, cash withdrawals taking place, cash deposits happening, but not in your bank, in another bank, and there is splitting and merging of bank accounts happening. Integration, creating those bogus accounts, and then money parked in those bogus accounts and then transported from there. Disguised ownership of assets, and lastly, criminal funding used or disbursed for third-party transactions. So placement, layering, and integration, three sources of income. Okay, any questions so far, guys? I just want to we'll establish some rules. Do we need a quick 5-6 minute natural break and then continue? Okay, good. I just want to ask you guys a question. Your names seem to be slightly more familiar. Have we interacted before? We have. For what? Strategic business or strategic management? Okay, great. All right. So this class is not new to me. Okay, wonderful. Okay, great. So should we quickly take a 6-minute break and then come back and continue with our discussion? Okay, so let's do that. Okay, people, are we back? Cool. Everybody back? When did we do strategic management, guys? That was when? All right, are we back? Let's move on then. February or March? All right, yeah. Okay, so good. We can chat about that a little towards the end. So please take a picture if not already taken. This is a small, short and simple case study. We don't have breakout rooms this today, but we will have them in the future. So today we look at it more from the webinar point of view. I would want somebody to also talk about this aspect. So either nominate or I would select somebody to do the talking as well. So kindly take a picture shot of this case study on money laundering. And the questions that we want to answer is, what are the different stages of money laundering that are visible in this example? And what can be your features for designing a robust fraud and risk model to tackle money laundering? Take a picture shot and take a picture shot here as well. Yeah, going to give you about 10 minutes in total. Read it and understand the questions, and then as a class, we would discuss it. Yeah. If you want me to share it again, let me know. I'm assuming you're doing the reading and therefore the answering the questions, yeah? Another 5 minutes and then we'll discuss it. So again, guys, this was the case. And these are the questions. So guys, let's try and look at the first question. What are the different stages of money laundering used in the example? So what are the 3 different stages of money laundering, people? Anyone? Anyone willing to talk? First priority there, and then we can talk about the 3 different stages by 3 different people. So the 3 different stages are, anyone wants to take a cool shot at it? Okay. Ayush, would you like to talk about it since you're right on list and you've started it first? All right, so I'm going to just give you the talking thing so you can speak. Yeah.
Morning, sir.
Hello, morning.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So, sir, we can see that initially the
Firstly, what are the 3 stages, Ayush?
integration, layering, and placement, I guess.
Perfect. Okay, now tell me any one of them that you want to talk about. Yeah.
So, integration is the first one, creating the fictitious or the bogus accounts for loan sales and financial statement or disguised ownership of the assets.
Okay, correct. Good. All right, just hold on there. Yeah. So integration piece is the fake accounts that you have highlighted, right? Anything else on integration, Ayush?
The criminal is tapping into his network, so it can be considered as an imposter in that.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Disguised ownership of assets.
Disguised ownership of assets, yes. Imposter will not be anybody because that's the fraud, and therefore they are parties to the fraud. Yeah, the victim and the claimant.
But sir, can it be there now that bank manager might not know just because of the personal relationship with the bank manager, the person just didn't verify, the bank manager didn't verify the person's information.
Correct. So that is a process flaw.
Process flaw.
Yeah, that is a process flaw. But the bogus accounts, what you highlighted, fits into integration.
Okay.
Right? And the activities were also probably funded not for genuine, but for illegal activities, right? Disguised ownership of assets, creating fictitious accounts, and funding for illegal activities, basically.
So negligent, it comes under negligent, that means.
Yes. Okay. So that is the integration piece which you've talked about. Now we have 2 other pieces that we want to talk about, and that is as highlighted, layering and placement. So anybody else who would like to talk about placement or layering? I was just hold on, yeah.
Okay, sir.
Anyone else on placement or layering? I think Deepak, you mentioned something, right, on the chat. Sorry, Dinesh, if you mentioned something, would you want to talk about one of those, which is either layering or placement? Yes. Hello, Dinesh. I want somebody to speak about it, guys. So if you're ready, please raise your hand. I'll ask you about layering or placement. I've read the comments on the chat. Dinesh, I don't know, are you at the beach or are you in class? Not aware about all the 3 stages. You listed down something saying internal sources were used, etc. Okay. Bharani, you want to go ahead? You're talking about placement in particular. Okay, we have a volunteer. Thank you. So just a minute. Yeah, we have a volunteer. So I'll speak to Bharani first and then Devasis. Yeah. Yes, go ahead, please.
Hello, Professor.
Hello.
Yeah. So with respect to placement, I just wanted to say it's the amount. I mean, the currency is in dollars. It's not an Indian money or so change of currency is one portion of placement.
And can you complete that change of currency, rupee to dollar, right?
Yeah, rupee to dollar, or it's from dollar to rupee. It was ideally to be.
Okay.
Because it is invested in dollars. If you go by the statement, 12 million or $80 million. And so maybe that portion of time, I think, could be extra vigilant to have this checked. I mean,
That is true. So therefore, a currency exchange or change of currency is what you're highlighting as placement.
Yes, yes. And the
Okay.
amount is also pretty high. It's a very big deposit.
Yeah, but is that placement? Yeah.
Sort of, but I'm not sure it's placement or layering. But
Yeah, I would put it under the other one, not under placement. So hold any other things on placement. There were cash deposits also, right?
yes, yes, yes.
So there were cash deposits and there were change of currency. Both fall under your territory. Yours, as in, just you're the owner of placement now. So placement and integration is the two aspects that we've covered so far. Yeah, both of you just hold on. Devasi is the third one. Let's go with you.
Yeah, hello sir.
Hello.
Hello sir, good afternoon.
Yes, good morning.
So what I have studied, the first stage is the placement stage, the second stage is the layering stage, and third stage is the integration stage.
Very good.
Yeah, in placement stage, what the fraudster do, they will put their money, they will hide the source, and they will put their money in legitimate sources, like in financial institutions and other institutions where they will hide the source and they will place the money. It is called the placement stage. That means placement, as the name suggests, it means placing the money. The second is the layering stage. That means they will break the transactions, okay, in different layers. And third is the integration stage, where they will get the money through legitimate sources so that they can show that it's a legitimate money.
Correct. So the the black has become white through this.
White. Yes, sir.
So now that people have talked about integration and placement, what are the areas that indicate layering done here?
For this case, sir, this case, yeah, the 2 minutes.
Yes,
so
sure.
You can show me give me the slides, the case study. I can just tell you because I'm on my phone right now. The slides, right? Yeah. So the first case, what the bank manager has done is a negligent stage where the bank manager has not taken the photograph to open the account. Okay, sir. Without verification of address anything, and they have taken the money.
Mm-hmm.
They have taken done the transaction of 12 million US dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
So under placement, which of these are applicable here? Under layering, we talked about placement and integration. Under layering, any of these visible? Wire transfers, cash withdrawal, cash deposit in another bank.
So wire transfers were there. Yes, sir. The wire transfer were the 12 million US dollar.
Mm-hmm. So wire transfers were there. Cash deposit in another bank was also there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The total amount is $80 million, sir.
Yes.
Transfer to Hong Kong after integration. Yes, sir.
Right. So that is there. So we do see cases of placement, layering, and the last one of integration evident in this case here. Correct?
Professor, just a query.
Yes.
Does creating these 4 additional accounts with the same branch, or will it be part of the splitting and merging?
Yes, it will be. No, they created. Yes, absolutely. So that that will be a part of this layering function.
Okay.
Yeah, because they have split and merged and created bogus accounts. Yeah.
Okay, Professor.
Okay. Okay, very good. So we've got layering, we've got integration, and we've got placement as well. And then let's try and answer the second part of the question. And the second part of the questions is, what can be your features for designing a robust model? So what are the variables that you will take into account to create a fraud and risk model? Anybody else, or my 3 panelists, whoever?
I think the first can be what in my point of view, it was a regular cross checking, cross communication with the customer to be the first step. It can be done.
Cross verification, right?
Verification.
Jaya also says verification. Okay. Yes, Ayush, you wanted to add something?
The regular, you can say the physical verification of the account should be there. For example, if the account has been processed by the manager, there should be authority over the manager that would be verifying every additional details that are missing or that needs to be added, and plus calling on the same address and or allotting a person to physically confirm that address.
Correct. And I think you had mentioned that, right? We said this is a part of the process.
Pardon, sir?
Oh, you had talked about this, right? That there is no verification done, and this is a part of the process. So all process loopholes have to be first corrected.
Yes, yes, process loop.
So I think then training would be also a part of.
Yeah, but that is an action, right? That is an action. So first, if you have to develop a model to detect and prevent frauds, what variables are we going to put into account? Yeah, both what Ayush said and what you are saying, Debasis, are all actions to prevent and detect frauds. Better process controls, better maker-checker system, training to staff, all of these are actions. But what variables will you use to detect frauds?
The customer data, like in terms of authenticity of the data.
Reliability of the customer data. Okay, now what variables from that customer data would you need?
Like Aadhaar, PAN card, I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that is what we need to know, Bharani. No, not yeah.
Transaction history.
Transaction history, or also called as frequency of transactions. Right. So, for example, only an example, if Ayush has done 5 transactions last month, and those were the details: 1 to Sudan, 1 to even within India, 1 into Switzerland, and those can be your transaction history telling you frequency of transactions and the amount of transactions done. Amount as in the value. Okay, and I think therefore the volume, the frequency, and the value needs to both come in as part of transactions made. So 2 variables out of that. Any others?
Number of transaction in a particular bank at a particular time.
We've said frequency of transactions there.
So can it be the amount of transaction?
We have said frequency in terms of number of times and value, both amount. Let's take the example of Bharani. He said a PAN card or something. The profile of the customer is very, very important in terms of the income source of the person, whether the person is self-employed or does he or she work, and the person's income. All these needs to be even as part of client profile. Okay. Any others?
Income tax history or taxation history.
Which is the PAN card details. Yeah, so the PAN card details or Aadhaar card details can go in as well. Anything about where are these transactions done? For example, are they done with low risk or high risk countries, and what kind of activities are they done from? So purpose of transaction, is it regular trading, is it funding, is it what? So purpose of the transaction, and which countries are they being sent to or transported to, back and forth, that becomes important as well. So we've got about 7-8 variables so far that we've looked at. Any others? The volume of transactions, frequency, the value, client profile, percentage of transactions made in cash versus wire transfers, and where have they been sent to, high or low risk countries becomes important to look at. Yeah. Anybody wishes to add anything else? And then after that, you're going to say we want to put an action plan in place. It definitely seems like there is a weak loophole in the maker-checker system. Processes have got to be more tighter, better employee training of how to handle fraud and risk. And there has to be an audit of this function done far more periodically than otherwise. And when you do a maker-checker system, maybe the automation can happen here. Use of technology to make sure that the data that you're working with is free from errors to begin with. And this clearly requires a detection model with the variables that we have suggested. Now, when you use the variables for the first time, it does not mean that these are the variables used for life. They are a ongoing process, and you can change the variables as you move along in case a new variable is seen to have an impact more with fraud than it would have been in the past. Yeah, like sending to which country is becoming very important now than ever. Thanks to the geopolitical situation around us, this becomes important, and the purpose of the transfer is being asked at by your bank now to be able to convince them that this is not for any illegal activity. Yeah. Okay, good. So just to put these notes together of what we discussed. So, this is what we see in terms of placement, currency exchange made, cash deposits made, layering, we saw wire transfer, deposits in other accounts. Integration is funding for illegal activities. Our model features includes many more variables. Some of them is the frequency, the value, and the volume. What percentage of transactions were done in cash? What's the profile of the client? And then, which countries are they sending this money to in terms of transfer? Your model will detect obviously your model will highlight or detect this, but your graphs will show that, your analysis will show that, and there is something that it will also pop up very, very timely, and that is any anomalies in the transactions that are carried out, whatever period of time that you're looking, and that's called as outlier tests or outliers detection. Yeah. So that becomes important as part of your prevention detection systems. More actions that you spoke about, you can say this requires a complete, overall in terms of how transactions are being looked at. Is there a robust system in place, maker checker system? And how can it be leveraged to mitigate these fraud and risks in the future? Yeah. Any questions, anyone? Can we move on? I have not thought about it as yet, Bharati, but yeah, chances are you would get such similar kinds of situations in your exam as well. We will be talking about your exam on the last day of class for sure, where we discuss the exam paper in terms of the kinds of questions and the topics that you need to focus on. Okay. Clear, guys? Okay. Is there a way to get away our digital footprints to avoid frauds? Very difficult to, if it is a loose system, Kishore, yes, but if it is a solid foolproof system, then the end-to-end transaction happens. Who signed digitally? There are a lot of these in e-procurement, for example, you track the source from where it has been generated, which IP address, and where does it end. So if it is a loose control system, yes, it cannot be detected. But if it's a tighter system, then chances are that it will get detected if it is an anomaly used or it is an anomaly during any part of the process, which is why the process has got to be foolproof for you to be able to detect and prevent frauds in a very, very robust and very, very timely manner. Okay. So fraud detection, some interesting findings. This is the respondents who were told asked what are they doing to invest in terms of technology to prevent and detect frauds. About 70% they say they do transaction monitoring on a real-time basis, which means there is an investment in technology to be able to look at the data on a real-time basis. 2/3 of them say they use physical biometrics like voice, fingerprints, and facial recognition about another 2/3 say transaction monitoring using AI algorithms or machine learning basis, and that's they've specified. So AI and ML and the related algorithms that you write are being used by organizations globally. And about 33% look at transaction behavior and they monitor that behavior along with the related customer information to be able to detect and prevent fraud. So of course, this is more than 100%, which means a combination of this is being used by banks to be able to combat their fight in towards fraud and prevent this from happening in the future. While organizations are investing into these, at the same time, fraudsters are becoming much more sophisticated into what and how they are carrying out their business activities. And in this environment, therefore, what becomes essential is to educate the customer. To educate this customer with regards to detecting and preventing frauds. Okay. Now, some people turn around and say that because we don't invest in new emerging technologies, we cannot come up with a fraud and risk model, and that's wrong. This can be coming up even though you are having a very basic system to work with, including Excel. So start small, grow big, but definitely do a start. Don't not start because you cannot complete what you have eventually envisaged to achieve. Yeah. So it can happen with Excel. If the volumes are bigger, then of course you need better processes and systems, but Excel can handle a lot of records which a mid-size organization can look into. Because investing in technology requires money, time, resources. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody can afford that. But that does not mean you cannot detect or prevent frauds. How do banks identify the fraudulent activity from the customer? About 89% identifying based on what the customer is doing. They're tracking their behavior. Automated systems, which is investing in the so-called red alerts that the system will flag off if any of the anomaly is looked into. Internal external audit functions. Whistleblower, look at the power of the whistleblower. 2/3 of the fraudulent activity are getting highlighted by this whistleblower. Third-party consultant doing it for you, and about 55%, about 71% are still doing through manual systems, which is incredible because obviously you can't invest, but that's happening at a 71%. So on an average, guys, if you were to, there are about two reasons why people have, or there are two kinds of things that people are doing in terms of detecting or preventing frauds. Yeah, and these two could be a combination of any of these to be able to detect or prevent frauds. I'm sorry, not even two. About if you total all of these up, that goes to beyond 400%, and therefore tells us that about on an average 4 kinds of things that people are doing, which is out of these 5 a combination of any 4. So this is some words that we will hear in the world of analytics, including fraud and risk analytics. And one is descriptive analytics, which means what has happened. Predictive analytics is obviously what is going to happen tomorrow, and we want to prevent it from happening tomorrow. That is the main goal or aim. And prescriptive analytics to be able to prevent it from happening tomorrow, what needs to be done today. So very, very important. Descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics, and a combination of all of these 3 are used to prevent and detect frauds. Okay, when you start your analysis, please start with one very, very important thing, and that is data reliability and validity becomes very important. Double question and double confirm that whatever information or variables that you're choosing, otherwise your number of variables gets swollen up a lot. You may have a lot of unwanted, irrelevant variables in your model. Please make sure that this is this is answering the objective that we have on hand, and the key objective that we have on hand is to prevent and detect frauds. Yeah. So descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, and prescriptive analytics. Always have the objective or goal in mind. I have another interesting video also, a short one to show. This talks about the importance of data analytics in fraud function or in fraud detection. And of course, we've talked about it, but it reinforces it. And I just want to play this here.
Analysis for fraud detection. Data analysis technology enables auditors and forensic experts to analyze an organization's business data to gain insight into how well internal controls are operating and to identify transactions that indicate fraudulent activity or the heightened risk of fraud. Data analysis can be applied to just about anywhere in an organization where electronic transactions are recorded and stored. Data analysis also provides an effective way to be more proactive in the fight against fraud. Whistleblower hotlines provide the means for people to report suspected fraudulent behavior, but hotlines alone are not enough. Why be only reactive and wait for a whistleblower to finally come forward? Why not seek out indicators of fraud in the data? That way, organizations can detect indicators of fraudulent activity much sooner and stop it before it becomes material and creates financial damage. To effectively test for fraud, all relevant transactions must be tested across all applicable business systems and applications. Analyzing business transactions at the source level helps auditors provide better insight and a more complete view as to the likelihood of fraud occurring. It helps focus investigative action to those transactions that are suspicious or illustrate control weaknesses that could be exploited by fraudsters. There is a spectrum of analysis that can be deployed to detect fraud. It ranges from point-in-time analysis conducted in an ad hoc context for one-off fraud investigation or exploration, through to repetitive analysis of business processes where fraudulent activity is more likely to occur. Ultimately, where the risk of fraud is high and the likelihood is as well, organizations can employ an always-on or continuous approach to fraud detection, especially in those areas where preventative controls are not possible or effective. Once an organization gets started with data analysis, they usually find that they want to do more and dig deeper into the data. Modern organizations have increased management demands for information, and the audit paradigm is shifting from the traditional cyclical approach to a continuous and risk-based model. Technology therefore offers a range of solutions, varying by the size and sophistication of the audit organization. From ad hoc analysis, through to repeatable automated procedures, and continuous auditing and monitoring, analytics provide insight into the integrity of financial technology, provides more accurate audit reports and business operations through transactional analysis. Thanks for watching. For more
Again, guys, reinforces the importance of fraud and therefore not conducting frauds, but detecting and preventing frauds, depending on data, data availability, data reliability, for you to be able to take and make the right decisions. Yeah. So fraud detection becomes very, very important, because only if you detect it, my personal view is, are you able to prevent it in the future? So detection becomes important. Many a times, most organizations are not able to detect it by the time they've, like in the earlier case study that we saw, it got detected after the loss amount was so huge and their processes were so non-robust that this was slipping under the nose and it only got caught by chance. Now, by chance is not a good thing. You have to have enough processes to make sure that fraud detection happens in a very structured, organized manner. Most organizations are therefore required by law to have a separate fraud and risk officer, or a manager, or a chief risk officer, who will not report to the CEO directly. You will report to the board of directors, with a dotted line reporting to the CEO. Also, what we've seen is that earlier, before the regulation came through, the function of fraud and risk would reside with the finance person. So the CFO would be responsible for finance as well as for risk, until the regulator came through. In the case of the banking world, the regulator came through and said, no, we want we want an unbiased reporting, and therefore the reporting was made to the board with a dotted line reporting to the CEO. Yeah. So detection is important. And because of detection, the investment in technologies, the investment in data cleaning, the investment in making sure that what you're working with is good, sound, reliable, valid data. Okay. Now, therefore, everybody uses or carries out fraud analytics in whatever ways and forms there are. But the biggest difference in how and what is being done is the robustness of the variables. On an average, guys, personally, I think, and I've seen it also, on an average, about 15, 16 variables are used in your fraud models. The range varies from about 12, 13, 10 also in some cases, all the way up to 20, 25 variables. If they are relevant, include them. But if they're not relevant, then of course, do not include them and swell the model, because you'd rather use a variable that has an impact onto frauds. So the methodology, the robustness, the reliability and validity of the data that you've used differentiates one source of data analytics compared to another one. So it is not the technology that differentiates, it is the methodology, and that's what you need to understand as well. Organizations are investing heavily into it in whatever forms and means that they can afford, depending on the size of the fraud, and they're doing it on a regular basis. The only thing that you should do is when you choose your methods or choose your variables, don't change them, on a more frequent basis. So don't change the variables every day, every week, every month. At least keep them steady for a year, unless and until you have enough proof to introduce or drop a variable in the 1 year period based on the data trends that you would have analyzed. Unless of course it becomes regulatory, then that you cannot do anything about it. You got to change or introduce that variable on an immediate basis. So have a very agile model so that you are able to plug and play variables depending on the external environment requirements. Okay. So fraud prevention versus detection. Okay, now we see what we see here, but based on our understanding, what do we believe are the differences between fraud prevention and fraud detection? Of course, besides the spellings, anyone? Both of them together will help us combat frauds, but what is the difference between fraud prevention versus fraud detection? Bharani, which one is proactive and which one is reactive? Yeah, detection is more to react, prevent is to proact, correct? Therefore, detection happens more based on descriptive analytics. Prevention will happen more based on predictive analytics. Yeah. Any others, guys? There is a very strong correlation between fraud detection and fraud prevention. So if your detection is right, prevention will automatically be right. And therefore, people have to invest in detecting rather than preventing. So detecting means have a good, solid groundwork base in terms of your policies, your procedures. That is what you're going to change based on what you detect to avoid having this in the future. Have a good set of variables that you want to look into to be able to detect and prevent fraud. Not all fraud can be prevented. Not all fraud can be detected and therefore prevented. Why? Because it requires a lot of time and resources, and therefore we do something called as prioritization of fraudulent activities so that you can detect and prevent frauds, especially the ones that have high risks to the organization. Yeah. Any questions on this important term, guys, prevention and detection? All good? Any questions, clarifications? Anything that you want to add to it? So prevention is reactive, detection is reactive, prevention is proactive. Detection is descriptive analytics, prevention is predictive analytics. Yeah. Okay. So what does your fraud strategy depend on? It depends on the methodology or the variables that you've chosen in the model. It depends on the logic, the rationale for why you're doing what you're doing. Why is this variable included? Mainly relying on the concept of reliability of data and validity of the data. Generates reports. It provides the outputs both in terms of analysis as well as in terms of dashboards for management to take an action on an immediate run basis. And these actions are solutions that is going to help work the ways out in terms of detecting, preventing fraud. So if you want to modify a solution, you can do that. Goes back to modifying the methodology. Yeah. So two kinds of things that are happening here, fraud detection methods. Rule-based system is it is not a machine learning based system. It is more running on rules, and these rules are logics based on past experiences or past doings of the organization. There is a lot of manual checks involved in this process, and not all aspects are automated. Therefore, wherever there is manual checks involved, it does look into risky behaviors, or it does help cause a little issue there. But if your manual maker checker systems are robust, then obviously it's going to help you detect and prevent frauds. Largely used by all organizations. Rule-based is used by all organizations to detect and prevent frauds. Okay, the selection of the variable is less focused on data, but more focused on experiences, saying that because we've experienced this, let's use this or not use this variable. It is very iterative, and therefore has has a lot of speed in terms of detecting and preventing frauds. Machine learning, obviously, you have the AI and the MLs here, and they get attached. They will study the past behavior and flag off any anomalies that they observe in the data that they've analyzed in terms of trends, and therefore helps you detect and also prevent these frauds. All the iterations can be looked into back and forth to be able to ensure that what you're looking at is far more relevant and far more doable. So a lot of effort is taken away from what is being done manually or what is done through less impactful systems into AI or machine learning based systems. Yeah, so rule based versus machine learning based. Not to say that one is better than the other. It requires investments, and therefore organizations are actually using a combination of both of them, or only rule-based, I would say, to detect and prevent frauds. Now, suppose if we were to implement a fraud detection model for an insurance service provider to examine the relationships between the policyholder and their dependents. What variables would you be able to advise, either rule-based or machine learning-based, but what variables would you advise for the bank to be able to look into? Yeah. Any thoughts on what variables? This is the question. If you were to implement the insurance fraud detection model for an insurance firm, what variables would you use if it were a rule-based versus if it were a machine learning-based system that you're developing? Any thoughts there, people? Hello? Any thoughts? What variables would you consider? Customer profile is correct. Now, a little bit specifics here. Customer profile is whether, are you saying marital status? Okay. And why marital status for an insurance provider? Okay, in terms of nomination, yes. Okay, good. So demographics of the customer or profile of the customer becomes an important source that you want to manage or you want to test here. And one of this is also things like whether or not, what is the age of the person? Do you think age is an important variable to look into? So guys, if it was a rule-based system, marital status, yes, and the age of the respondent, or not the respondent, the policy holder, and the age of the spouse and the age of the child becomes important if you're building a rule-based system. So if you say, for example, anybody is, because if you can claim or you can meet a claim of the spouse within 18 to 80 years of age, then obviously anything outside that becomes an outlier. Similarly, the age of the child who's claiming for the parent, if it's about 25 years, then please flag it as a red alert. Okay, so that's on the rule-based system. On a machine learning-based system, if you would use the same thing, they will detect the spouse's age based on the behavior. And what if we see that if policyholders who have claimed or who have done a claim are in the age group of 19 to 55 years, then a 70-year-old spouse will be flagged in as an anomaly, as an outlier in a machine learning based program, which would not be there in the rule based program. Okay, so because machine learning does it, there is faster processing, number one, and it does it based on the behavior of the person, and therefore it flags off anything which is out of the ordinary. In this particular case, guys, loan disbursed to customers got picked up, and the most important thing that got picked up was the age of the customer. About 35 or 36% of the portfolio, nearly 40% of the portfolio of loans given to customers comprised of customers' average age of about 58 years. The retirement age is being, for example, is 60 years, and a 3 or a 5-year loan or a 10-year loan was given to a customer age 58 years. Does it build risk to the model, or does it build risk to the system? The answer is quite obvious. Yes, it is, because a risky proposition of this kind is going to not serve the purpose appropriately. Yeah. Hence, the age, which was not seen as a variable, got introduced in, and that had the highest impact on detecting frauds. When this got noticed, saying that about 40% of the customers who have been given a loan is being given a loan at the age of 58 or around that for 5, 10, 3-year period also. And that is a risky business. Benefits of machine learning, obviously it happens that you have much quicker, faster, speedy way of looking at stuff. You can look at outliers, you can look at the magnitude of the outliers, its impact on the data. The variables can be changed accordingly to be able to prioritize or weight the variables that have an impact on the program. But what it also says is that the learnings from your rule-based get implemented in machine learning, and machine learning's outputs also help in you developing your rules. So they're an integrated model that is used by an organization for the common objective of detecting as well as preventing frauds. Some limitations: if you don't have any historical data, for example, if you've just signed up for Netflix, it's not going to tell you your historical usage, and therefore machine learning has to wait until there is some amount of viewing done by you to be able to recommend something for you. Nobody knew how to handle COVID and whether this was genuine, whether this was right or wrong, and therefore that led to a problem in the model, because what was acceptable, what is not acceptable, it was a very difficult question to handle during COVID times. Loss of data: customers were reducing, customers were discontinuing their relationships, and therefore the robustness of the data was also questioned. And your rules, if they're not done right, they could fall flat, because then it is based on what X thinks versus what the data is there to prove it for you. Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much, no one system is better. Obviously, a combination of both of them are used before anything else happens with regards to detection and prevention of frauds. Okay, now I see that there is a feedback form already uploaded, sent to you guys. So kindly please fill your feedback, and then we will just quickly revise and end the session today. Just take a couple of minutes to kindly give feedback on today's session. Have you given? Let me know so that we can. Done, Prof. Okay, good. Bharani has done it. Others? Okay, done. Anyone else? Can you please do it? And then we'll quickly do a review, and then we can all leave. Yeah. Some have already left. That's fine. Okay, and while we've done this, guys, how was the day one overall in terms of general feedback? Was it okay to continue? Was there enough interest in today's topic that we've talked about? Anything that we need to do more or less of in our next session? Did you believe that it was time invested? So the key takeaways from our today's session, guys, are, firstly, the overall understanding of fraud. And there are 4 types of fraud. What are the 4 types of fraud? Money laundering, phishing, insider threats, and which is the 4th one? Money laundering, insider threats, and phishing and data compromise is the 4th one, right? Different types of insider threats. It could be malicious, it could be accidental, it could be negligent, but they all have an impact on the frauds. Money laundering, 3 broad sources: placement, layering, integration. Placement is change of currency, cash deposits made, or change of denomination. Layering is splitting or merging accounts, cash deposits made but into another bank, cash withdrawals, and obviously wire transfers. Integration, creating fictitious accounts, disguised ownership, and obviously funding for non-illegal activities. Fraud prevention and detection are important, and therefore what is also important is the terms used in analytics, which is descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics. Fraud detection is more descriptive, fraud prevention is more predictive analytics, and that's what one needs to be working with. So rule-based or machine learning, both are good as long as they are complementing each other, and as long as they are taking inputs from each other, and as long as the variables that are included in them are both reliable as well as valid. So the four components of your fraud strategy is your methodology has got to be robust and correct and right. The variables that you've included are reliable and valid, and they are based on the functions of logic. It is creating reports for you to be able to take or make the decision. And obviously it helps you provide a solution. In our case, the objective being fixed, which is to detect and prevent frauds. Okay, so that's broadly what we've covered in our session today. Any questions before we finally sign off, guys? If you haven't filled, kindly fill in your feedback again. And otherwise, if there is any question, more than happy to address it. I want you guys to have read there's nothing on simulation as such. There is a project that you'll be working on. The data is there. The instructions are pretty, straightforward getting there. I want you to have gone through. If there's any clarification that you need, I will discuss that in session 2, and I will discuss a lot of those clarifications that you need in session 4 as well, by which time a lot of what we've done would have been completed. But no harm to start off early. So kindly read the assignment. It's very straightforward. The data sets have been given to you, both clean data and unclean data. Obviously, you'll work with clean data, but what all was done to make it clean is given to you. So work on that. And then there are questions that are assigned to you after which you need to address, or which you need to solve or answer rather. Okay. Great. Wonderful, guys. So if there's no other questions, we see you on Saturday, and have a good week ahead of you. Take care, guys. Thank you. Take care.